Good evening and welcome to Capitol Report on NTD. Here's what's coming up. Will the Supreme Court step in? Trump turning to the nation's highest court to stop the Friday sentencing in New York. And the Justice Department reveals what it might release from the special counsel's probes on Trump. Deadly wildfires devastate Southern California, killing at least 5 and injuring many more as flames rage across the state. President Biden calls them astounding, and President-elect Trump is blaming Governor Newsom's policies amid reports of limited water to battle the blazes. And why does President-elect Trump have his eyes on Greenland? And could the Inuit government's desire for independence help him? We'll hear from the director of the Polar Institute at the Wilson Center.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
Good evening. I'm Melina Weisskopf in for Steve Lance tonight. 5 lives lost to raging fires in Southern California. Over 80,000 residents are under mandatory evacuation. NTD's Christina Corona is at the scene of the Eaton fire.
We're here in the city of Altadena, where the Eaton fire has now scorched over 10,000 acres. Hundreds of homes are being burned to the ground. As you can see behind me, you can actually hear the pops of pieces of the home falling all on this street of Mendocino. LA fire officials gave an update on the blaze at a morning press conference.
We have over 500 personnel assigned, and unfortunately, we have 2 reported fatalities to civilians. Unknown cause at this time, and we do have a number of significant injuries. We have over 100 structures destroyed, and the cause of the fire is unknown and under investigation.
The Eaton fire began Tuesday around 6 p.m. near Altadena Drive and Midweck Drive above Altadena. It has destroyed over 100 structures and is now threatening about 13,000 buildings. The Pasadena Convention Center, Arcadia Community Center, El Camino Real Charter High School, and Westwood Recreation Center are all serving as evacuation shelters for fire-affected residents. As of Wednesday morning, nearly 400,000 Californians were without power, including 260,000 in Los Angeles County amid fires, with tens of thousands more affected in nearby areas. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency, cautioning that the strongest winds are anticipated to occur between 10 p.m. Tuesday and 5 a.m. Wednesday. President Biden has announced he will also sign a federal emergency declaration. One resident who assisted his parents with evacuation said they were fortunate their home didn't burn down.
Their house is okay, but unfortunately a lot of the neighbors' houses, as you can see, they're burned down. We went to this house that's right over here, and my brother-in-law is actually putting out a fire to try to save that house. But there's a lot of houses just burning house to house.
This is one of 4 major fires burning in Los Angeles, with the Pacific Palisades fire now scorching over 15,000 acres. Then there's the Hearst fire in Sylmar and the Woodley fire in Los Angeles. All fires are 0% containment and it is still under investigation. Reporting from the city of Altadena, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And President Biden responding to the Los Angeles fires. He shares an update after meeting with California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Trump says a state law has prevented adequate water from getting into fire zone areas. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the latest.
President Biden says that he's being frequently briefed on the LA fire situation and urges people to listen to local officials. He says FEMA approved a fire management assistance grant to support areas that are impacted and help reimburse the state of California for the immediate firefighting cost. My administration will do everything it can to support the response. The president also met with California Governor Gavin Newsom. He says he's instructed the Department of Defense as well as the California and Nevada National Guards and Navy to provide more firefighting personnel and capabilities.
We're prepared to do anything and everything as long as it takes to contain these fires and to help reconstruct.
Vice President Kamala Harris says Doug and I are praying for our fellow Californians who have evacuated And we are thinking of the families whose homes, businesses, and schools remain in harm's way. We are deeply grateful for the heroic first responders who are risking their own safety to fight the flames and help keep communities safe. The President and First Lady were in the Los Angeles area on Tuesday to designate 2 new national monuments. However, due to the hazardous wind conditions, President Biden's remarks were rescheduled. They both departed back for Washington, D.C. Wednesday afternoon. The FEMA assistance grant the White House approved for California is a 75% cost share reimbursement for firefighting expenses. And President-elect Donald Trump also commented on the fires, calling them, quote, virtually apocalyptic. He criticizes a state rule protecting the endangered smelt fish, saying it's prevented, quote, millions of gallons of water to flow daily into parts currently affected by the fires. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And just moments ago, President-elect Trump arrived in the nation's capital to pay respects to his late predecessor, Jimmy Carter. Trump, along with other former presidents and congressional leaders, are expected to attend Carter's state funeral service tomorrow. In a statement on Sunday, Trump wrote, quote, the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. And for that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Former President Carter passed away at age 100 last month in his hometown of Plains, Georgia. His casket will remain in the Capitol Rotunda for public viewing until 7 a.m. tomorrow. Then he will be transported to the Washington National Cathedral for a state funeral. In new developments in President-elect Trump's legal cases, Trump is asking the Supreme Court to stop a Friday sentencing in the New York case. And the Justice Department says it plans to make public a report on Trump's 2020 election case. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from West Palm Beach.
As a Friday sentencing in Trump's New York business records case is fast approaching, President-elect Trump on Wednesday turned to the Supreme Court for help to stop it. Trump's lawyers in the new brief write that forcing Trump to prepare for his sentencing while he's preparing to lead the free world as the U.S. president imposes an intolerable, unconstitutional burden on him that undermines vital national interest. His team also insists that a New York court lacks authority to sentence Trump, while Trump is still appealing the case on the grounds of presidential immunity. The latest ask comes after New York courts earlier this week rejected Trump's request to delay the sentencing. While Trump won't have to go to prison, the sentencing will still carry symbolic significance. The Supreme Court will need to step in by Thursday to halt it. In another development, the Justice Department says it plans to release Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on Trump's 2020 election case. But the part about Trump's classified documents case will not be made public, as 2 former Trump aides are still active defendants. It comes after Trump argued that the release of the entire report will interfere with his transition process and hurts the institution of the presidency.
And it'll be a fake report, just like the investigation was a fake investigation, because it was a fake case against a political opponent. They thought they were going to use this to beat me.
The Justice Department has already dropped its cases against Trump, as Trump is set to become the president, and the department's longstanding policy states that it cannot prosecute a sitting president. And Trump is bringing a shakeup to the Justice Department by staffing its top ranks with his personal defense attorneys. And those are the same ones who have been fighting this week to block the release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's report. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Iris Tao, NTD News.
GOP lawmakers prepare for a Republican trifecta in Washington. President-elect Trump is negotiating with senators and congressmen the details of a reconciliation plan that's key to advancing the Republican agenda. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more.
House Freedom Caucus members and Republican committee chairs will travel to Mar-a-Lago this weekend to meet with President-elect Donald Trump and discuss the details of a reconciliation bill the Democrats already plan on opposing.
They're trying to cut a deal to hurt the American public. That's what this is about. And so they're going to have a lot of closed-door meetings. They're going to say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, that is their fundamental focus.
President-elect Donald Trump wants to see the debt ceiling suspended, while the right flank of the Republican conference wants guarantees that the reconciliation bill will have significant government spending cuts.
The intention is to handle the debt limit in reconciliation in the process, and that way, as the Republican Party, the party in charge of both chambers, we then get to determine the details of that. If it runs through regular order and regular process and as a standalone or as part of the appropriations, for example, then you have to have both parties negotiating. And we feel like we're in better stead to do it ourselves.
Late December, Speaker Johnson negotiated an increase of the debt ceiling of $1.5 trillion with President-elect Donald Trump, and he also negotiated with the right flank of the Republican conference to include government spending cuts of up to $2.5 trillion in the upcoming reconciliation bill.
Unfortunately, today there are a lot of people out there who would like to see the Senate turn into a copy of the House of Representatives. And that, Mr. President, is not what our founders intended or what our country needs. And one of my priorities as leader will be to ensure that the Senate stays the Senate. That means preserving the legislative filibuster.
The reconciliation process is the only opportunity Republicans have of legislating on budget matters without needing the support of Democratic lawmakers. Senator John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, believes that Republican senators can only stomach a reconciliation process split into two bills, as they also have to tackle the confirmation process of President-elect Donald Trump's nominees.
We need to be fair but thorough and give every nominee a chance to make their case, while also subjecting them to some tough scrutiny. That is, after all, what any reasonable job application process demands.
The reconciliation process is expected to tackle border security, tax cuts, spending cuts, and the debt ceiling. House Republicans wish to send a legislation to the president's desk within his first 6 months in office. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And coming up next after the break, a Canada and Greenland plan. Trump's ambitions extend to eyeing the two countries. We'll have a Republican commentator and a Democratic strategist to weigh in.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return. Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
我们师傅讲过，过去武术的身法，你上阵的，你要是身法你不保持好了，你就失去了生命。
Are today's mainstream martial arts not traditional martial arts?
现在有些人他学说传统武术，他尤其是西方人，他不懂。
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Joining us now to discuss the latest developments surrounding Trump's ambitions for his incoming term are Republican commentator Scotty Hughes and Democratic strategist Lee Nevis, president of Cross Currents. Scotty and Lee, thank you so much for joining us today, both of you. So President-elect Trump is doubling down now on Canada. I want you guys to listen to what Trump said yesterday, and I want to get a reaction from each of you.
Economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada?
Scotty, you're up first. I want to ask you, what do you think Trump wants to achieve here?
Okay, well, let's just call it what it is. It would be mutually beneficial for both countries if they would just become one. But the likely that that's going to happen is going to be just as much as Justin Bieber coming out with a country album here in this next year. I think it's this is what Trump does. This is a gambler. He's going out there. I mean, you're looking at the Panama Canal. You're looking at Greenland, or Mara Igloo is what I'm hearing it's being called now, to Canada itself. He's throwing this big grand net. And like you do with any negotiation, okay, so fine, I'm not going to get Canada, but I think his ultimate goal is to get Greenland and possibly even the Panama Canal. Those are the two. This is kind of saying, you know, I'm not going to get everything I want. So people that are on the other side can say, oops, Trump doesn't get everything he always wants for. We're at least doing something to stop him.
That's interesting, Scotty. With that being said, Lee, I want to ask, do you have any concerns about the next president of the United States directing any efforts towards this?
Look, I think Trump is doing what he does. He is, you know, talking off the cuff, spitballing ideas that he thinks are great. And like I said earlier today on another interview, you know, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And Trump has died by the sword before during his first term. I think here you have to be careful when dealing with Canada. We get 70% of our oil from Canada. They're not exactly a nation I really want to get mad if we're getting that much oil from them. And I think the Canadians might have a problem with becoming the 51st state. I should know. I've got relatives who live in Canada, and I tease them about being the 51st state all the time, and the looks I get from them are less than friendly. In regards to Greenland and the Panama Canal, especially Greenland, I'm not sure why we would want to buy a big block of ice. I do find it ironic that a president who is coming in talking about cutting government spending, creating the Department of Governmental Efficiency to cut government spending, is now going to spend a whole lot of money to buy a big block of ice, and then we got to spend probably double, triple that to run the big block of ice.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, Lee. Actually, a guest I had on yesterday was saying, you know, good luck with trying to get Canada residents on board with this idea that Trump has here. I want to get into something that's a little bit not as lighthearted, of course, Trump's legal cases. So we know that his sentencing is happening on Friday. In the case of New York, and Judge Aileen Cannon is blocking the release of special counsel Jack Smith's final report on the Trump investigation. Lee, at this point, do you think these legal cases impact Trump's presidential transition work and popular opinion of him?
I don't think they do. I think at the end of the day, they go away. And let me be very clear. I think it is very important to set a standard that no one is above the law, that no one in America, be it the president or the taxi driver who took you to lunch today, is above the law, and the law is applied accurately and evenly to everyone. That being said, especially with the Supreme Court's ruling last year in regards to presidential powers and presidential immunity, I think a lot of these issues on the Trump legal cases become moot, and he gets away with it scot-free. The people of America have spoken. They have elected, for better or worse, they have elected Donald Trump as our next president, and I think everyone in America wants America to succeed, no matter who the president is, Republican or Democrat. We all want America to succeed at the end of the day.
Lee, you just said you pretty much feel like these legal cases are just moot, they're over with and done. Scotty, do you agree with him? Do you see there a chance being of the Supreme Court tossing out his conviction in less than 2 weeks?
I wish we had one of those magic rewind buttons to go back a year ago, probably to what Lee was saying, or 2 years ago, because probably all of them are the conversations that I had 2 years ago. You would have thought Trump deserved to be in jail and to rot away, and they were picking out his jail cell numbers. Like this was the end all be all of Donald Trump's presidency. But now that we're at this stage, I think they're being very graceful about it. But I agree, no one's above the law, but also no one should be targeted because of their political opinions or what side of their aisle. And no one should use their political office to target their enemies. And that's what this administration has done for the past year. And that's why these cases are going away, because there's no more power left in the person that was doing the targeting. So I think that's why they're going to go away. I actually would love to see the judge try to throw Donald Trump into jail, even though he's ruled that out. I think that shows right there that Democrats have realized the reason why Trump got elected, as much as they like to blame the Republicans, it was their own party and their own failing strategy of continuing to push these failed DOJ investigations, these failed law cases against him that caused Americans to actually go and actually look at Donald Trump and realize that if he's being targeted by a group, by politicians, there's probably a good reason why, and they need to be on that side.
Now, I want to get both of you guys' perspective on something that I think many Americans are thinking about as Trump is getting ready to take office. That is social media, how he's going to handle social media and, free speech. So I want to get to your reaction to Meta's recent announcement, Meta free speech.
So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US.
Lee, what do you make of Meta's motivation here?
Look, Mark Zuckerberg is pandering. This is the biggest case of pandering, most blatant case of pandering I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that because my ex-wife used to work for Meta. But it really is, at the end of the day, Mark Zuckerberg sees where the political winds have blown, that Elon Musk, who has turned Twitter into X and to just a giant, free-for-all for whatever anybody wants to say, he sees that's where the winds are going. Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, anyone in the social media space is very concerned about governmental regulation of social media. There are people out there saying maybe we should treat social media as a utility with greater governmental regulation, and especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. Zuckerberg has gone all in on the metaverse, all in on AI, and he doesn't want government coming in and telling him what they can and can't do. We had a big battle about that here in California last legislative session. So this is very much Mark Zuckerberg doing this. Let's see which way the wind is blowing politically and adjusting accordingly. He's doing what's best for his bottom line and his bank account.
Right. An interesting perspective there. Scotty, what's your reaction? And specifically, I want to know, do you think Meta's proposed changes will impact future American discourse at all?
Well, let me just point out, Lee gives a very common sense approach, not only to his politics, even though he's on the other side of the aisle, but to this issue. And he is completely right. This is pandering. This is Zuckerberg realizing that potentially his company could be broken up into pieces, doesn't want to do this. This is self-preservation, but he's also seeing the opportunity that Elon Musk did by getting on the train early and thinking maybe I might be able to get a little bit of that gravy if I stay on here for what it is. Do I think that Zuckerberg's politics are like Donald Trump's? Probably not. But I think he realizes that if he was staying with this same game underneath this administration, he was going to face some real challenges to keeping his company continue to thrive. Something that it was already having that had nothing to do with politics, but Facebook itself was finding itself diminishing in value in society than it had been in the past. I do think that there is still going to continue to be, especially with TikTok and the controversy coming up as to whether or not it's going to make or break it here in the United States here in the next week or two. I think that Zuckerberg's realizing that he's got to become a little bit more competitive. And it's really hard when you have one of your biggest competitors, CEOs, sitting right on the right hand of the president of the United States. So Zuckerberg's trying to do what he can right now, including putting Dana White on the board of Facebook, doing what he can to somehow get in on this train.
Very interesting. I think we found a lot of common ground here in this panel today. Thank you guys both for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And tune in tomorrow. We'll have live coverage of President Jimmy Carter's state funeral at the Washington National Cathedral. President Biden, as well as all 4 living former presidents, are expected to attend the funeral. Tune in at 9 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, right here on NTD. And coming up next, can President-elect Trump acquire U.S. control of Greenland? What are the U.S. interests in the island nation? We'll talk to the director of the Polar Institute at the Wilson Center, and we'll hear from folks in D.C. about the President-elect Trump's geopolitical vision for the next 4 years. From renaming the Gulf of Mexico to buying up territories around strategic waterways, that and more when we return.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Days Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Days Enzyme Fermented Coffee.
If you're watching this, I didn't make it. Thanks to people like you and the American Heart Association, my family never had to see this video. I was a healthy 47-year-old, no symptoms, but then my doctor discovered I had a bad heart valve that was beyond repair. The scariest day of my life was when I was sitting on a gurney as I looked and my wife was at my side and my kids had me surrounded. Deep down, you know, this could be it. This could be all there is.
Not having him around for Riley to grow up with and have that papa figure in his life, that would have been hard.
This little heart valve did something really big. It saved my life. I wouldn't be here today without it. The research for this heart valve was funded by the American Heart Association. And that's why I'm asking you to become a monthly donor for just $19 a month. When you do, you'll help fund the next medical breakthrough that could save your life or the life of someone you love. You'll also provide life-saving CPR training and help certify hospitals to give the best care to those who have had a heart attack or stroke. When you give $19 a month, we'll send you a t-shirt just like this one. From the moment you put it on, you'll help raise awareness for heart disease and stroke. Since my surgery, I had a son get married. I had a daughter graduate high school. I had another daughter give birth to a precious boy. I would have missed all that. And that's why it's personal for me.
We're very thankful for everyone who is a donor because it gives us more time.
Every 40 seconds, someone has a heart attack. The next person you help save could be someone you love or even you. Become a monthly donor today by calling or going to helpheart.org because it's personal.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
President-elect Trump said on Tuesday he's considering moves for the U.S. to control Greenland. What are the economic and strategic interests? Joining me now to discuss this latest development is Rebecca Pincus. She's the director of the Polar Institute at the Wilson Center. Rebecca, thanks for joining us today. When Trump was asked Tuesday at a news conference about whether he would rule out military or economic coercion to gain Greenland and Panama, his response was, no, I can't assure you on either of those two, but I can say this, we need them for economic security. Rebecca, what kind of economic security could the U.S. gain from this?
Sure, it's a great question, and I think it's natural that the commander-in-chief wouldn't rule out policy options. But I do think Greenland's growing significance to the United States is clearly on the table here, and it's great that it's getting the attention it deserves. Greenland is strategically important from a geographic perspective. It sits at the border between the North Atlantic and Europe and the Arctic region, which is an increasing importance. Greenland has strategic military significance. We have an important U.S. base there, Patuxent Space Base, which has been around since the Cold War, and it's got a rich mineral endowment, as well as other important attributes. It's got a rich endowment of energy. It's got rich fisheries. It has a population that's increasingly interested in independence. And so I think for all those reasons, it's great to see U.S. taking an interest in Greenland. And if we can move ahead to strengthen and deepen our strategic relationship, I think that'll be a great benefit for the United States.
We know China dominates the global rare earth mineral production and has already threatened to restrict the export of critical minerals ahead of Trump's term. Do you think that Trump's move to try to acquire Greenland is a preemptive consideration, you would say, that would protect the U.S. if China decides to restrict the export of critical minerals?
We do know that Chinese interests have made some overtures to Greenland regarding minerals, and I think it's important to respond to that. Greenland has a rich endowment of a variety of minerals, including rare earths and critical minerals, uranium, and a whole host of other natural resources. I will say that many of those minerals are very costly to bring to market. Greenland is not an easy place to access. It's not an easy place to do business, given the harsh climate and some of the scarcity of infrastructure. And so there have been challenges getting mining off the ground in Greenland, but the population is very interested in increasing mining. And I think the U.S. should certainly try to be the partner of choice as Greenland moves to develop its rich resources. We certainly do not want the Chinese government taking leases and locking up Greenland's resources. Greenland is right on the U.S.'s doorstep. It's one of the few places in the world where rich resources like that have not yet been developed. So it's a great future resource, and China's dominance of rare earth mining and processing is a real problem for the United States. So steps that we can take to solve that are really welcome.
Now, from the perspective of Greenland's population as well as the government, we know that Greenland's Inuit-led government has been ramping up demands for independence from Denmark. Do you see this potentially benefiting Trump's ambition?
Greenlanders certainly want to be independent, and we've seen that across the years from a variety of polling. It's very clear that Greenlanders want to be independent. It does come with some significant challenges. There are about 57,000 people on Greenland, majority Inuit. At this point, the Greenlandic government, which is still part of the Kingdom of Denmark, has control over quite a few sectors of government, including natural resources, education, healthcare, a variety of domestic political concerns. The Greenlandic government also relies on a very significant annual financial transfer from Denmark. It's about $500 million, and it finances quite a bit of the functioning of Greenland as a country. And so the path to independence is really inherently tied to that annual block grant. And it's hard to see how that would be replaced in the short term. Over the long term, the people of Greenland, I think, hope that mining revenue will enable them to achieve independence. But getting mining revenue to a point where it could fully replace the Danish block grant is quite a ways off in the future. And so any conversation around independence sort of immediately stumbles into this financial question. And there's no easy solution there. And so I think being sensitive to those concerns and sort of the practical realities is very important in this conversation about Greenlandic independence.
Now that the U.S. and Greenland have sort of been working on this relationship for quite some time, and that's expected to continue and even more intensity under the incoming Trump administration, what do you think are some of the benefits of that cooperation from what we've seen so far with the relationship building?
Sure. So again, I would point back to the U.S. military base in Greenland, which was set up in the early days of the Cold War. And it was formerly known as Thule Air Force Base, and Thule was renamed last year to Batuvik Space Base, and that was a reclaiming of the traditional Inuit place name for the location of the base. So the Department of Defense has signaled that it wants to strengthen its relationship with Greenland through that base renaming process. Greenland is very important to U.S. continental defense. We have a base in northern Greenland because it enables us to point radars and other sensors northwards and look across the Arctic region at Eurasia and get advance notice of any potential incoming threats, particularly, from Russia, right? And so I think having a really strong military relationship, having Greenland and Denmark as founding members of NATO, That's all really tremendously important, and advancing that relationship in this new era of modern intercontinental missiles and missile delivery systems, hypersonics, space-based systems. You know, there's a whole host of reasons why Greenland is very important to the defense of the United States and North American homeland.
Rebecca Pincus, you're the director of the Polar Institute at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. Great to have you on today.
Thanks so much.
So how do everyday Americans feel about President-elect Trump's plans to shake up the geopolitical landscape, like purchasing Greenland and the Panama Canal, to renaming the Gulf of Mexico? Here's what NTD's Sam Wong heard on the National Mall earlier today.
What do you think about Trump's plan to purchase Greenland and the Panama Canal?
Shows he has no tact whatsoever, and he's just on another planet with his mind.
The Chinese are taking over a lot of the world. They're doing it with money. Let's just buy Greenland, and that gives us a nice base of operations. And apparently, there's a lot of mineral resources there that are untapped at this point.
I'm from Denmark, and I think he hasn't really understood the fact that Denmark doesn't own Greenland, so we can't really sell it.
So many Americans died there building it. Why would they sell it for $1?
And how about Greenland? What do you think about that, buying Greenland?
And for security, I think its proximity to the U.S. And nothing is happening there. Why not?
You know, I thought the message of the election was issues closer to home, the economy, the price of gas, the price of eggs, things like that. So now that we're really focused on annexing the Panama Canal, taking over Greenland, it just seems like a really odd change of pace to me.
How about Trump's idea to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America?
I hadn't heard that one, but that's another good joke.
It is what it is. I couldn't care less either way. I live in Florida, so.
Changing name is no big deal at this point. Just do something. Get rid of the corruption.
I mean, I think he's only gonna rename it for America then, because I think the rest of the world is going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico.
I don't think it'll happen, but it's pretty funny. The Canada idea, first of all, it couldn't be the 51st state. It's too damn big. Yeah. And there's already, 3 provinces up there? So you got to break it up a little bit.
Sure. But you're open to it.
But I'm open to it. They got good beer up there. It's okay.
Now more reactions on this. Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum had her latest back and forth with President-elect Trump over his ideas on the geography. In response to Trump's pledge to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, Sheinbaum suggests that North America could be renamed Mexican America.
The United Nations recognizes the name Gulf of Mexico. But next, why don't we call it Mexican America? It sounds nice, doesn't it? The Constitution of Apatzingán called it Mexican America since 1607.
Sheinbaum jousted with Trump in recent weeks and used her daily press conference to give a history lesson flanked by old maps. Sheinbaum also denied Trump's claim that Mexico was run by the cartels and said her country is addressing the security problem. Despite the back and forth, Sheinbaum reiterated that she expects the two countries to have a positive relationship. And coming up, how Russia's military weakness and China's demographic struggles could affect the U.S. We'll talk with the former Secretary of Commerce in the first Trump administration after the break.
Sometimes business travel takes you to London, Paris, New York, Rome, Beijing, or Hawaii. And sometimes to Palawan, Mimaropa. Here at Book a Limo, we think globally. We think business, your business. It doesn't matter where you go. No place is too far. We're there for you.
What's your destination? Book a limo. Any car, anywhere.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。 天鹰的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
Kids love it. Parents trust it.
Obviously.
Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjiong Campus courses led by expert educators.
This is spectacular.
Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more.
Wow.
All while having fun.
Perfect.
Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Welcome back. I'm Melina Weisskopf. Looking abroad, a lawyer for impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol today denounced efforts to detain him. The Presidential Security Office has fortified Yoon's compound with barbed wire and rows of tightly placed vehicles. This has police prepared another attempt to take Yoon into custody.
체포영장 We urge the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials to either indict or seek an arrest warrant. Then we will comply with the court hearing. That is our stance. 그러면
The Corruption Investigation Office says it will take stronger action. It warns of potential arrests of presidential security staff if they obstruct. Yoon's lawyers have challenged the legality of the detention warrant. They say the agency lacks the authority to investigate rebellion charges. They've urged the agency to either indict or seek a formal arrest warrant. Meanwhile, the opposition Democratic Party accuses Yoon's legal team of stalling the process. The case relates to Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law on December 3rd. And at least 13 civilians are reported dead after an alleged Russian attack in Ukraine. This comes as Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is hosting a meeting on Ukraine in Germany today. Here's the latest and a warning. This report includes footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
A Russian guided bomb killed at least 13 people and injured 29 others on Wednesday. That's according to local authorities in southeast Ukraine, who say the number of victims could rise.
With 2 guided aerial bombs, Russia aimed for a residential district. As of now, we know of 13 dead.
High-rise apartment blocks, an industrial facility, and other infrastructure were damaged in the attack. The debris hit a streetcar and a bus with passengers inside. The bus driver recalls the moment of the attack.
People were leaving their shift through the main entrance of the Enterprise, and that's when the attack came. There were 2 very loud explosions.
I see that people were killed inside your bus?
Yes, 2 people were killed and 2 others were wounded. 2 were killed.
This comes as Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is in Germany. He arrived at the U.S. Air Base in the western town of Ramstein earlier on Wednesday. Austin is there to host the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting. Senior military officials from around the world are there to discuss support for Ukraine. However, the Pentagon says there won't be any announcements coming out of the meeting just yet.
You can expect the Secretary to continue this important work at Ramstein tomorrow.
And Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in France. He commented on President-elect Trump possibly making a deal to end the war in Ukraine.
If there's going to be a deal, we'll want the best possible deal, one that doesn't unravel when Russia sees an opening.
He added that such a deal should include some kind of deterrence so Russia won't attack again in the future.
How could Russia's military weakness and China's economic demographic struggles affect the United States? Those are some of the topics in the new book, Risks and Returns. Joining me now to discuss his insights in the book is author Wilbur Ross. He's the former Secretary of Commerce in the first Trump administration. Wilbur, now you mentioned in your book that Russia's nuclear arsenal may not be fully operable and called it a largely impotent country. Now, how does Russia's military weaknesses affect its global power and its relationships with allies like China, for example?
Well, I think we've learned a lot about Russia, and a lot that at least surprised me, even though I had been on the National Security Council Principals Group for the 4 years of the administration, first administration. What surprised me was how poor they were at strategy. Their whole strategy for invasion seemed to be just throw masses of people and masses of equipment in. And that obviously was fairly ineffective against the Ukrainians. But the other bigger surprise was how poorly maintained their equipment was. Their tanks were not well maintained, their fighter planes, their bombers were not well maintained at all. And that raises the serious question, their nuclear warehouse, which is their big claim to power, is mostly from the 1970s. Now, if they haven't maintained that equipment very well since the 1970s, who knows if it's even operative at this point, because you can't leave complicated systems to their own for all those years. So I don't know the answer, but certainly Russia looked weaker than we had thought and is weaker now that they've had so many casualties. I mean, the very fact that they had to hire 13,000 soldiers from North Korea is a tremendous sign of weakness on their part and a tremendous sign that they're running out of military age people that they can get to come and fight. So I think Russia is being unmasked quite a bit as a sort of paper tiger. And so that's good. What's not good is that it's making them more dependent on China and on Iran for equipment, and nowadays making them somewhat dependent on North Korea. So that's worrisome, because the more that we force those three Axis powers to act jointly, that's not a good sign. That's really how World War II got started. So I don't like the parallel that we're forcing, or the events are forcing, those three entities to work more and more together. That's not good for us.
Right. I think you raise a very important point there. Another important point that you raised, an alarming point in your book, you spoke about the Pentagon study that showed roughly 77% of young Americans are ineligible for military service, and that the U.S. active military is actually smaller than China's by about 500,000 service members. Wilbur, you argued about the importance of boots on the ground. What can the incoming Trump administration do to build up our military deterrent, especially with regards to China?
Well, I'm not an authorized spokesman for the Trump administration at this point, so I can just give you my personal opinion. I think the president is well aware that we need to build up the military. I think he's also aware, though, that the most important part will be the technological part, the drones, the missiles, the items like that I think boots on the ground, while they're ultimately important if you're going to actually occupy a country, but I don't think boots on the ground are in the first instance going to be where a big war would be conducted. I think it's more likely to be missiles, drones, satellites, and cyber. I think that will be the really key determining factor if there, God forbid, is a big new war.
Now, you also mentioned China's struggles within its demographic decline and economic stagnation, for example. How do you think these issues will affect China's political stability and its interactions with global powers like the U.S. and India?
The demographics of China are very, very bad. The population declining, particularly the working age population. Now, they recently increased the retirement age by a couple of years. So that'll help a little bit because it will extend somewhat the duration of workforce potential involvement. But population decline is a big problem, and it's a big problem also for the economy. They've been struggling trying to get consumer spending to be more as a percentage of the economy, and they've been fairly unsuccessful in accomplishing that. They haven't done a very good job rehabilitating the real estate sector so far, and that's a huge problem because in China, a lot of the government spending comes from the localities, from the provinces and from the cities, and their big source of revenue is land sales to developers. Well, since the development market has pretty well collapsed, it's creating a tax receipt problem as well, and that's forcing both the local governments and the federal government into more borrowing. There is a lot of social unrest, and the reason is young people, the aggressive ones, used to leave the little villages and the tertiary cities and go to the big cities. And there were millions of jobs being created in the big cities, so that worked fine. More recently, the jobs haven't been there, and so they're literally busing those people back to where they came from. That's a real problem because these are the more motivated young people. They were dissatisfied enough that they left their families behind, and family is a very intense relationship in China. Left them behind to try to find a new life. Now they got disappointed. They go back now to the smaller community. That's a very dissatisfied person who's very prone to try to do something against the government. And I think it's part of why President Xi is making such severe measures to keep consolidating power. And it's a real boiling pot. Now, the worry for us in all that is the traditional remedy that a dictatorship uses when they're having domestic problems is to start a war externally. Then they blame everything on the party with whom they're fighting. So, while it helps in the sense of weakening them economically a bit, it could lead to more trouble sooner, simply as a diversion of the dissatisfaction and helping the government keep control.
Wilbur Ross, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
And we have a weather update for you. A developing winter storm threatens to drop snow, sleet, and freezing rain on parts of the southern U.S. Cold air that's escaped the Arctic is plunging temperatures to sub-freezing levels. National Weather Service meteorologists predicted snow likely in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Further south, the snow could transition into sleet and freezing rain, which meteorologists say could result in dangerous driving conditions. Hundreds of car accidents were reported in Virginia, Indiana, Kansas, and Kentucky earlier this week, and nearly 100,000 customers remained without power last night in states to the east of Kansas. The polar vortex of ultra-cold air usually spins around the North Pole, but it sometimes ventures south into the U.S., Europe, and Asia. And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. From the nation's capital, I'm Alina Weisskopf in for Steve Lance. Y'all have a nice evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.